welcome to the third review of the evening. Up this time is Shadow Madness. The world of Arcos, I'm guessing that's how that's pronounced, is in chaos as a mysterious plague known as Shadow Madness ravages the land with no cure. It strikes without warning, leaving vile creatures and piles of dust where its victims once stood. As the one hope to this doomed land, you must stop this scourge before it stops you. Right. So, more poignantly, Shadow Madness is a game with a mildly interesting history to it. For it is the, I suppose, great Western attempt, at least on the PlayStation, to emulate the success of Final Fantasy VII and the JRPG golden age that was ushered in right after that. Because even though this is, very, very styled after, Final Fantasy VII and JRPGs in general, it is, in terms of development, it comes from the West. But it does have a lineage to JRPGs, because the team that made Shadow Madness, they were a lot of Square veterans. Specifically, a lot of people who made the Square USA game Secret of Evermore eventually worked on this project in Shadow Madness. Up to and including the, for some reason, famed 16-bit translator of Square RPG, Ted Woosley. He was a
the thing about Woolsey's translations that makes him famous/infamous is that he always ended up changing a lot, but usually ended up doing it in an interesting way.
Yeah, which was the style of the 90s, because, he was hardly the only one who was doing that. I mean, that was Working Design's entire philosophy.
It was also a lot more interest. It was also a lot more necessary then, for reasons involving amount of physical data space on the cartridge.
Right. Yeah, especially in the 16-bit era. That eased up a lot once we got to the CDs. Anyway, point of order is, this is a game that's Western development, but does have a JRPG or console role-playing game, as we called them back then, pedigree to it. You could argue it's further blurring the lines between those distinctions or whatever, but, here's the thing, nobody really cares, because Shadow Madness is in that great vault of forgotten games. This isn't even, say, another JRPG that was published by the same publisher in that year, Jade Cocoons, which also, that is a fairly underground, fairly mid-tier JRPG of the era.
Wasn't that the one with monster raising mechanics?
Yeah, my point is, that game at least has a cult following, small as it is, as opposed to Shadow Madness, which is just merely forgotten. I'm sure there's a few people out there who, this game was their Final Fantasy VII or whatever, but by and large, this game released to a very crowded market, and not a lot of people paid attention, which is why it ended up in the hands of Pico Interactive. At least I assume that's the case. Anyway,
probably.
So this game was assigned to the Galax for review, so he has some stuff to tell us about it.
The first thing I'm going to approach with this is some issues with this Pico Interactive version of the game. I've heard that there might be some sound balance issues. I don't know how those are compared to the original. But first off, this is in a relatively bare bones emulator, and it is vital before you begin to play this that you make sure that the D-pad, face buttons, and shoulder buttons and triggers, and start and select, are mapped correctly. Because this game has some very interesting ideas about menus and use of buttons, and the default mapping does not have the triggers all mapped correctly. The default mapping, I think specifically R1 is mapped to like one of the stick clicks. And R1 is used for using items in battle and possibly also for running on the overworld.
I'm almost wondering if using, like, if you plug in a DualShock through one of the USB adapters, how it auto maps that. It might be using that where
it does specify only partial controller support, so some jankiness is not super unexpected.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you've seen, if you're watching the video thing onto actual game content, this game starts as a cold open with your definitely a rogue class main protagonist in a bar telling the story of how he got there. Then it jumps back to the actual beginning of the thing, which is that he woke up after taking a camping trip or something, gets back just in time to see his town being destroyed, then meets up with a couple of other characters and makes their way to the town where the prologue was. That is how far I got. I got back to that town. For me, that was like a couple of hours of gameplay. There are 3 bosses in that space, one of which is optional. It would be significantly faster if you knew what the run button was, because the default overworld movement speed is very slow. I found this, by the way, this is a game that came out on the PlayStation in 1999. That is the heyday of GameFAQs. There are 3 complete walkthroughs, several mechanic guides, and maps of most of the major areas on GameFAQs, which is helpful. I've never actually played Stardew Valley, Mr. Sargent, so I don't know how slow that is, but it's very slow, especially when you're moving away from the camera in any kind of tilt thing. That's another thing this game very much does, the pre-rendered background style thing, although it's usually pretty good at being able to tell what's in gate, what you can interact with. Petty Fan's going through, as I recommended, the controls rundown, because the battle controls for this. So when you start a battle, you got your guys and you got the enemies. You use the shoulder buttons and triggers to go between 4 basic options, where the options containing attacking are on R1, and the options involving running are on, what, R2?
Something like that.
Yeah.
L2.
Engage gets you close to the enemy and lets you use regular attacks. There are also... And when you're attacking, you get choices between guarded, normal, and aggressive, which improve your defense or offense. Usually you want to use not use guarded unless you're really worried about the enemy killing you. Or later on you get spellcasters, they might want to do that, but they'll also be using items and, spells and stuff. So yeah, there are also options. Apparently, you get ranged weapons that I never figured out how to use, but apparently you can use them when you're not engaged with the enemy. There's also.
Oh god, that is a slow walk.
Did you find the run button?
Yes, I did find the run button.
Yeah, the run button is like a decent walking speed.
Yes.
It looks like. It's fucking slow. So yeah, the first several bits of this game is walking around, looking at the destruction, picking up lots of useless items. You will pick up. Yeah, this lock picking mini game is the reason why you want to make sure your face buttons and D-pad are mapped correctly. It is basically Simon using the directions of the face buttons and D-pad as the direction, and just you have to repeat the directions that it shows the thing going. The left one is on the D-pad, the right one is on the face buttons. Does that make sense, Petty?
And
it is random each time you do it, so you can't memorize it or anything.
I guess. Oh.
Is it mapped wrong?
I remapped it. Oh, different picks. I thought one of those was the shadow of the pick.
No. There's a left pick and a right pick.
Okay.
You always need two things to pick a normal lock, unless it's rakeable.
Unless it's a master lock.
You need a tensioner and a actual pick. Admittedly, the tensioner is usually used to provide static pressure, but same deal. So yeah, you will be picking up so you got projectiles, those dirks. I think you can use those by using your special attack. Because for the bow using spellcasting character, her special is hitting the enemy with her bow. Because guess what? Among the things that'll take up slots in your equipment inventory are multiple different kinds of arrows for the bow lady, in addition to multiple different bows. At least they stack.
Yeah. Oh my god, if they didn't stack, I imagine this game would have already been in the bin.
But yeah, you have a limited total inventory of like 30 items. I think that might be items and equipment, or it might be either or. And a large amount of the items you pick up will be things that heal 1 to 3 hit points or do nothing. And those things that say nothing in particular are essentially vendor trash, and some of them apparently can be sold for as much as 30 gold at some place in the game. Or maybe a little bit, but nothing is over double digits. Or at most places they sell for 1. This is almost completely worthless. They will, some of them, if you use a guide, you can figure out what you should save and bring to places later to get optimal money. But also, there are no shops until you get through the prologue, because all of the towns you go to are either exploded or full of unfriendly backwoods folk. There are also some 90s-ish... first off, it's Western humor. So there are some kind of not outright saying adult references, but kind of pointing at them.
Mm-hmm. If I recall correctly, this was rated T for teen back in the day.
Yeah. There's allusions to the fact that certain characters are participating in prostitution or something.
What?
Not your characters, just that other characters are.
Yeah.
Or people hitting on the girl in your party or whatever. Also, the equipment menu is kind of awkward. You only get choices of equipping. Select button brings up the global menu, by the way. There's a way to unequip things that I couldn't figure out what it is. I couldn't repeat it on purpose. So the dirk is not actually equipable. It's ammunition to be thrown. Which apparently is the special attack for the non-spellcasting characters. Or something. I think
keep
point
forgetting
man lets you change
triangle is exit from back in these old days.
Huh?
I keep forgetting that triangle is exit.
Yup, the buttons are the button uses are weird. But yeah, so like 3 of the face buttons bring up equip, use item, and use magic randomly. There is a guide that tells you stuff, so that's good, I guess. So
They're
yeah,
calling run turbo.
Turbo, aka move at a decent speed.
I get it. It's just hilarious.
Anyway, once you get action, magic, and item. The magic, item, and equip are just hotkeys to bring up those sub menus, where select brings up the actual global menu. I used that because it was easier for me to remember most of the time. So yeah, that's what it's the gameplay, aside from having really weird button choices, is a pretty bog standard J-style RPG from that era. Yeah, it's not going to let you leave this area until you meet the other character. Oh, are you listening to the game, Petty Fan?
I am not.
Okay, then you're not going to be able to do the other important thing that the tutorial guy tells you about.
Yeah, about dodging. Yeah.
Yeah, before you get into a random battle, you can still do it. Just press both triggers at the same time on screen to show what it looks like.
Oh, I can like crouch?
When you hear a random, you can't really crawl, but when you hear a monster roar, you push both triggers to drop to the ground, and if you do that quick enough after you hear the monster roar, it negates the random encounter.
That's interesting.
Lets you avoid wasting time or taking chip damage in minor areas, but you do also get experience in battle, and it does vary based on participation in ways that I never was able to actually killing a thing gets you more experience than just doing damage to it. Like when you have multiple characters. The characters that actually get kills get more experience, and I think the number of actions you take might also affect it. You can flee from most encounters without significant issue. There are some interesting things you can do with engage and evade, which is the opposite of engage. It makes you move away from the monster, which then they have to waste their time to move over to you. So you can, once you have multiple characters, kind of keep your ranged attacker safe, because she has much lower hit points than everybody else. Also, this game has a very low level cap. The actual level cap for the whole game is apparently 15. And your rate of leveling up matches that.
Hooray.
So you're not going to be leveling up very quickly. Luckily, you do get significant improvements on each level up. Yeah, you have to go to the left on this screen, I think.
Okay.
And then go a couple, and then try to go back. And the girl will be there, I think. So yeah, so overall, this is a very clunky game, but it does have some interesting ideas. The gameplay experience, once you get used to it, is relatively decent. The story I don't think is anything super amazing, but it is what you're really there for, I guess. Apparently they put a lot of emphasis on that in development. So here's the other thing that I'm curious how the emulation handles. Apparently this is a 2-disc game. However, instead of using the second disc as a just once you've gotten to the second part of the game, you switch to the other disc and don't need to use the first one much anymore. At some point in this game, you are introduced to a second world, and you can switch back and forth. You also get a total of 6 playable characters, which is enough for 2 parties. I don't know if they're ever in the same world or if you swap them, but to switch between the worlds, you have to go to a certain location and then swap discs. So there's basically each disc contains one of the world maps.
Yeah, the assets for each world, which that's fine. I've seen less clean ways to do that.
Yeah, it's a neat way of doing it. I'm just curious how the emulation is going to handle it, and I did not get nearly that far. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, this girl, she's the spellcaster. She has a bow. The third character you get is a farm robot who is immune to most status effects. He's also quite interesting. The characters are mostly interesting, but again, a lot of the beginning of the game is just, wow, everything is super goddamn fucked. And there's a bonus boss, or an optional boss that I did in the prologue that is apparently one of the harder bosses in the game based on what you have at the time. But you get some really nice stuff for beating it. So yeah, if I think there's some worth to playing this if you're interested in JRPGs from that era. I
guess specifically what
another take on it.
Final Fantasy VII did to RPG creation in the West in this time period.
Yeah, this game apparently did not do well, and the reason is because there are so many other JRPGs that are considered classics at this time, and I don't think this is a bad game, but it's no Final Fantasy VII. It's no Lunar Silver Star Story Complete. It's no
Wild Arms 2, Suikoden 2.
Yeah, I never played those, but I know they're very well regarded. I think this game is more complete than Xenogears, but Xenogears is also special for its story and themes, and also letting you punch things with giant robots.
You know, the usuals.
Yeah. I think Saga Frontier 2 would have been out by then.
Yeah, again, 1999 was a big point in time.
Lots of bangers in the JRPG space in 99.
Yeah. They were like, oh shit, we have a format where we can actually use like large amounts of text and good music. I'm not saying that previously they didn't have good music, but like CD quality music. So they kind of went nuts.
A little bit, yeah.
But yeah, I think there is some worth to playing this game just to see, because it does do a lot of things differently. Some of them are hits, some of them are misses. I would recommend if you are going to be the kind of person where throwing stuff away from your inventory bothers you, look up the guides on GameFAQs to find out what's worth anything and what you should get rid of, because you are going to run out of spaces.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any further questions?
Not that I can think
No,
of.
I think I'm good.
All right. Oh yeah, and the music it's pretty good. It's on theme for the kind of game it is.
Mm.
But yeah, no, this game, the setting is kind of interesting. I mean, I know Final Fantasy VII had a mostly technological setting, but this has an interesting version of. There's some technological stuff. There's some magic stuff. There's some slightly culturally insensitive stuff about natives in the desert not being civil or whatever.
It was the 90s.
Yeah.
That's what yeah. So yeah, it's janky, but it has a bit of charm to it, and it's, I think, probably worth seeing how things go, as long as they're charging an appropriate price for it. Adam, how bad is it?
$14.99, so $15.
It's probably fair for a decent length RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, like, that's also one is obscure and not in demand as this is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as also given the amount of effort, because let's be honest,
this is a pretty low effort emulation, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, look, we're familiar with the various tiers at this point.
Yeah.
And Pico, they tend to be on the lower side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think that's about all I got to say.
all right, then. So that'll about do it for Shadow Madness. Be sure to tune in after the break as we deliver our impressions of Hexters.